of Mice and Men is a novella written by John Steinbeck. Published in 1937, it tells the story of George Milton and Lenny Small, two displaced migrant trench workers, who move from place to place in California in search of new job opportunities during the Great Depression in the United States. Steinbeck based the novella on his own experiences working alongside migrant farm workers as a teenager in the 1910s, before the arrival of the Okies that he would describe in The Grapes of Wrath. The title is taken from Robert Burns' poem To a Mouse, which reads, "The best laid schemes of mice and men, gang aft glide. The best laid schemes of mice and men, often go awry." While it is a book taught in many schools, Of Mice and Men has been a frequent target of censors for vulgarity, and what some consider offensive and racist language. Consequently, it appears on the American Library Association's list of the most challenged books of 21st century. Plot: two migrant field workers in California on their plantation during the Great Depression, George Milton, an intelligent but uneducated man, and Lenny Small, a bulky, strong man but mentally disabled, are in Soledad on their way to another part of California. They hope to one day attain the dream of settling down on their own piece of land. Lenny's part of the dream is merely to tend and pet rabbits on the farm, as he loves touching soft animals, although he always accidentally kills them. This dream is one of Lenny's favorite stories, which George constantly retells. They had fled from Weed after Lenny touched a young woman's dress and would not let go, leading to an accusation of rape. It soon becomes clear that the two are close and George is Lenny's protector, despite his antics. After being hired at a farm, the pair are confronted by Curly, the boss's small, aggressive son with a Napoleon complex who dislikes larger men, and starts to target Lenny. Curly's flirtatious and provocative wife, to whom Lenny is instantly attracted, poses a problem as well. In contrast, the pair also meets Candy, an elderly ranch handyman with one hand and a loyal dog, and Slim, an intelligent and gentle jerk-line skinner whose dog has recently had a litter of puppies. Slim gives a puppy to Lenny and Candy, whose loyal, accomplished sheepdog was put down by fellow ranch hand Carlson. In spite of problems, their dream leaps towards reality when Candy offers to pitch in $350 with George and Lenny so that they can buy a farm at the end of the month, in return for permission to live with them. The trio are ecstatic, but their joy is overshadowed when Curly attacks Lenny, who defends himself by easily crushing Curly's fist while urged on by George. Nevertheless, George feels more relaxed, to the extent that he even leaves Lenny behind on the ranch while he goes into town with the other ranch hands. Lenny wanders into the stable, and chats with Crooks, the bitter, yet educated stablebuck, who is isolated from the other workers due to being black. Candy finds them and they discuss their plans for the farm with Crooks, who cannot resist asking them if he can hoe a garden patch on the farm, albeit scorning its possibility. Curly's wife makes another appearance and flirts with the men, especially Lenny. However, her spiteful side is shown when she belittles them and threatens to have Crooks lynched. The next day, Lenny accidentally kills his puppy while stroking it. Curly's wife enters the barn and tries to speak to Lenny, admitting that she is lonely and how her dreams of becoming a movie star are crushed, revealing her personality. After finding out about Lenny's habit, she offers to let him stroke her hair, but panics and begins to scream when she feels his strength. Lenny becomes frightened, and unintentionally breaks her neck thereafter and runs away. When the other ranch hands find the corpse, George realizes that their dream is at an end. George hurries to find Lenny, hoping he will be at the meeting place they designated in case he got into trouble. George meets Lenny at the place, their camping spot before they came to the ranch. The two sit together and George retells the beloved story of the dream, knowing it is something they will never share. He then euthanizes Lenny by shooting him, because he sees it as an action in Lenny's best interest. Curly, Slim, and Carlson arrive seconds after. Only Slim realizes what happened, and consolingly leads him away. Curly and Carlson look on, unable to comprehend the subdued mood of the two men. Characters: George Milton, a quick-witted man who is Lenny's guardian and best friend. His friendship with Lenny helps sustain his dream of a better future. He was bound in teasing Lenny since he was young. He is described by Steinbeck in the novel as small and quick, every part of him being defined, with small strong hands on slender arms. He has a dark face and restless eyes and sharp, strong features including a thin, bony nose. Lenny Small, a mentally disabled, but gigantic and physically strong man who travels with George and is his constant companion. He dreams of living off the fat at the land and being able to tend to rabbits. His love for soft things conspires against him, mostly because he does not know his own strength, and eventually becomes his undoing. Steinbeck defines his appearance as George's opposite, writing that he is a huge man, shapeless of face, with large, pale eyes and wide, sloping shoulders. Lenny walks heavily, dragging his feet a little, the way a bear drags his paws, adding that his arms do not swing at his sides, but hang loosely. Candy, an aging ranch handyman, Candy lost his hand in an accident and worries about his future on the ranch. Fearing that his age is making him useless, he seizes on George's description of the farm he and Lenny will have, offering his life's savings if he can join George and Lenny in owning the land. Slim, a jerkline skinner, the main driver of a mule team and the prince of the ranch. Slim is greatly respected by many of the characters and is the only character whom Curly treats with respect. His insight, intuition, kindness and natural authority draw the other ranch hands automatically towards him, and he is significantly the only character to fully understand the bond between George and Lenny. Curly, the boss' son, a young, pugnacious character, once a semi-professional boxer. He is described by others, with some irony, as handy, partly because he likes to keep a glove filled with Vaseline on his left hand. He is very jealous and protective of his wife and immediately develops a dislike toward Lenny. At one point, Curly loses his temper after he sees Lenny appear to laugh at him, and ends up with his hand horribly damaged after Lenny fights back against him. Curly's wife, a young, pretty woman, who is mistrusted by her husband. The other characters refer to her only as Curly's wife. Steinbeck explained that she is not a person, she is a symbol. She has no function, except to be a foil, and a danger to Lenny. Curly's wife's preoccupation with her own beauty eventually helps precipitate her death. She allows Lenny to stroke her hair as an apparently harmless indulgence, only for her to upset Lenny when she yells at him to stop him mussing it. Lenny tries to stop her yelling and eventually, and accidentally, kills her by breaking her neck. Crooks, the black stable hand, gets his name from his crooked back. Proud, bitter, and cynical, he is isolated from the other men because of the color of his skin. Despite himself, Crooks becomes fond of Lenny, and though he claims to have seen countless men following empty dreams of buying their own land, he asks Lenny if he can go with them and hoe in the garden. Candy's dog, a blind dog who is described as old, stinky, and crippled, and is killed by Carlson. Carlson, a thick-bodied ranch hand, he kills Candy's dog with little sympathy. The boss, Curly's father, the superintendent of the ranch. The ranch is owned by a big land company according to Candy. Wit, a young ranch hand. Themes. In every bit of honest writing in the world there is a base theme. Try to understand men. If you understand each other you will be kind to each other. Knowing a man well never leads to hate and nearly always leads to love. There are shorter means, many of them. There is a writing promoting social change, writing punishing injustice, writing in celebration of heroism, but always that base theme. Try to understand each other. Steinbeck emphasizes dreams throughout the book. George aspires to independence, to be his own boss, to have a homestead, and, most important, to be somebody. Lenny aspires to be with George on his independent homestead, and to quench his fixation on soft objects. Candy aspires to reassert his responsibility lost with the death of his dog, and for security for his old age, on George's homestead. Crooks aspires to a small homestead where he can express self-respect, security, and most of all, acceptance. Curly's wife dreams to be an actress, to satisfy her desire for fame lost when she married Curly, and an end to her loneliness. Loneliness is a significant factor in several characters' lives. Candy is lonely after his dog is gone. Curly's wife is lonely because her husband is not the friend she hoped for. She deals with her loneliness by flirting with the men on the ranch, which causes Curly to increase his abusiveness and jealousy. The companionship of George and Lenny is the result of loneliness. Crooks states the theme candidly as a guy goes nuts if he ain't got anybody. Don't make any difference who the guy is, long's he's with you. The author further reinforces this theme through subtle methods by situating the story near the town of Soledad, which means solitude in Spanish. Despite the need for companionship, Steinbeck emphasizes how loneliness is sustained through the barriers established from acting inhuman to one another. The loneliness of Curly's wife is upheld by Curly's jealousy, which causes all the ranch hands to avoid her. Crooks's barrier results from being barred from the bunkhouse by restraining him to the stable. His bitterness is partially broken, however, through Lenny's ignorance. Steinbeck's characters are often powerless, due to intellectual, economic, and social circumstances. Lenny possesses the greatest physical strength of any character, which should therefore establish a sense of respect as he is employed as a ranch hand. However, his intellectual handicap undercuts this and results in his powerlessness. Economic powerlessness is established as many of the ranch hands are victims of the Great Depression. As George, Candy and Crooks are positive, action-oriented characters, they wish to purchase a homestead, but because of the Depression, they are unable to generate enough money. Lenny is the only one who is basically unable to take care of himself, but the other characters would do this in the improved circumstances they seek. Since they cannot do so, the real danger of Lenny's mental handicap comes to the fore. Regarding human interaction, evil of oppression and abuse is a theme that is illustrated through Curly and Curly's wife. Curly uses his aggressive nature and superior position in an attempt to take control of his father's farm. He constantly reprimands the farmhands and accuses some of fooling around with his wife. Curly's Napoleon complex is evidenced by his threatening of the farmhands for minuscule incidents. Curly's wife, on the other hand, is not physically but verbally manipulative. She uses her sex appeal to gain some attention, flirting with the farmhands. According to the Penguin Teacher's Guide for Of Mice and Men, Curly and Curly's wife represent evil in that both oppress and abuse the migrants in different ways. Fate is felt most heavily as the character's aspirations are destroyed when George is unable to protect Lenny, who is a real danger. Steinbeck presents this as something that happened, or as his friend coined for him, non-teleological thinking, or as thinking, which postulates a non-judgmental point of view. Development of Mice and Men was Steinbeck's first attempt at writing in the form of novel play, termed a plain novelette by one critic. Structured in 3 acts of 2 chapters each, it is intended to be both a novella and a script for a play. It is only 30,000 words in length. Steinbeck wanted to write a novel that could be played from its lines, or a play that could be read like a novel. Steinbeck originally titled it Something That Happened, referring to the events of the book as something that happened because nobody can be really blamed for the tragedy that unfolds in the story. However, he changed the title after reading a Robert Burns's poem To a Mouse. Burns's poem tells of the regret the narrator feels for having destroyed the home of a mouse while plowing his field. Steinbeck wrote this book and The Grapes of Wrath in what is now Monte Sereno, California. An early draft of Mice and Men was eaten by Steinbeck's dog, named Max. Reception. Attaining the greatest positive response of any of his works up to that time, Steinbeck's novella was chosen as a Book of the Month Club selection before it was published. Praise for the work came from many notable critics, including Maxine Garrard, Inquirer's Son, Christopher Morley, and Harry Thornton Moore, New Republic. New York Times critic Ralph Thompson described the novella as a grand little book, for all its ultimate melodrama. The novella has been banned from various U.S. public and school libraries or curricula for allegedly promoting euthanasia, condoning racial slurs, being anti-business, containing profanity, and generally containing vulgar and offensive language. Many of the bans and restrictions have been lifted, and it remains required reading in many other American, Australian, Irish, British, New Zealand and Canadian high schools. As a result of being a frequent target of censors, of Mice and Men appears on the American Library Association's list of the most challenged books of the 21st century, number 4. In the UK, it was listed at number 52 of the nation's best-loved novels on the BBC's 2003 survey. The Big Read of Mice and Men has been challenged, proposed for censorship, 54 times since it was published in 1936. However, scholars like Thomas Scarseth have fought to protect the book by citing its literary value. According to Scarseth and True Great Literature, the pain of life is transmuted into the beauty of art. Adaptations. Stage. The first stage production was written by Steinbeck, produced by Sam H. Harris and directed by George S. Kaufman. It opened on November 23, 1937, in the Music Box Theater on Broadway. Running for 207 performances, it starred Wallace Ford as George and Broderick Crawford as Lenny. The role of Crooks was performed by Lee Whipper, the first African American member of the Actors Equity Association. Whipper repeated this role in the 1939 film version. The production was chosen as Best Play in 1938 by the New York Drama Critics Circle. In 1939 the production was moved to Los Angeles, still with Wallace Ford in the role of George, but with Lon Chaney Jr., taking on the role of Lenny. Chaney's performance in the role resulted in his casting in the movie. In 1958, a musical theater adaptation by Ira Bilowit, 1925-2016, was produced off-Broadway in New York City. The cast included several in-demand performers of their day, including Art Lund and Joe Sullivan, re-teamed after performing together in the hit musical The Most Happy Fella, as well as Leo, Pennsylvania. However, a newspaper strike negatively affected the production and it closed after 6 weeks. The play was revived in a 1974 Broadway production in the Brooks Atkinson Theater starring Kevin Conway as George and James Earl Jones as Lenny. Noted stage actress Pamela Blair played Curly's wife in this production. In 1970 Carlisle Floyd wrote an opera based on this novella. One departure between Steinbeck's book and Floyd's opera is that the opera features the ballad singer, a character not found in the book. A new version of the play opened on Broadway at the Long Acre Theater on March 19, 2014 for a limited 18-week engagement, starring James Franco, Chris O'Dowd, Leighton Meester, and Jim Norton. Film. The first adaptation was in 1939, 2 years after the publication of the novella, and starred Lon Chaney Jr. as Lenny, with Burgess Meredith as George, and was directed by Louis Milestone. It was nominated for 4 Academy Awards. A TV version, produced by David Suskind in 1968, starred George Siegel as George, Nicole Williamson as Lenny, Will Geer as Candy, Moses Gunn as Crooks, and Don Gordon and Joey Heatherton as Curly and his wife. A 1972 Iranian film, Topoli, directed by Reza Mirlai, was adapted from and dedicated to John Steinbeck and his story. In 1981 a TV movie version was made, starring Randy Quaid as Lenny, and Robert Blake as George, and directed by Reza Badi'i. Another theatrical film version was made in 1992, directed by Gary Sinise, who was nominated for the Palme d'Or at Cannes. Sinise also played George in the film, and the role of Lenny was played by John Malkovich. For this adaptation, both men reprised their roles from the 1980 Steppenwolf Theatre Company production. The 1992 Malayalam film Sariyumanasam, directed by Vijay Thampi, is also based on the novel. Radio of Mice and Men was adapted by Donna French-Child as a radio play directed by Kirsty Williams starring David Tennant and Liam Brennan, broadcast on BBC Radio 4 on March 7, 2010.